What is up, YouTube? This is Hypergon, you're at Chat with the Cap, and welcome back to my month-long Halloween special. This week, we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, the villains. Now, the villains for me are one of my favorite parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! As I said, because they vary so much on their motives and what ultimately makes them evil. So, I decided to count down my top 5 favorite villains in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Now, before I get started, I'm going to actually break down what I think consists of a villain. Now, obviously a villain is someone who serves as an antagonist for the main characters and someone who ultimately is evil. However, I can only count them as a villain during the time period where they themselves are actually evil. If a character has a change of heart later on, then that no longer counts. For example, Seto Kaiba is a villain in the first episode of the series because he's being evil for evil's sake. He doesn't want anyone else to have the blue eyes, and so he steals it from Yuki's grandfather and puts him in the hospital. Pretty evil, if you ask me. However, beyond that, he becomes more of a rival to Yugi and doesn't really do anything necessarily to hurt Yugi, but more just to prove that he's better than him. A villain, on the other hand, is someone who constantly keeps on trying to stop the main characters. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started on my top 5 favorite villains in Yu-Gi-Oh! So starting off this list on number 5, we have the main villain of Season 2, or second arc really, of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and that is Pouria. Now, quick spoiler warning, the reason I like him is actually his big reveal at the end, so spoilers. But the thing that I like about him, like I said, is his reveal as to who he is, because prior to, we just have the 3 other robots that make him up. The little kid, the older guy, and then the old man. But we never really know who they are. I mean, we see that they had struggles when the Mechlord Emperors invaded during their future time, but we never really know who they are past that. And then they all magically merge into this being known as Pouria. So throughout the duel with him and Yusei, we keep wondering, who is Pouria? And then we finally find out who he is. It turns out that the 3 people that made him up are actually Pouria during different instances in his life. The little kid was him as a child, then he grew into the younger man who had to watch one of his um, teammates, potentially lover, I think, die, and then eventually he's an old man just seeing this war-torn, decrepit world. It's not something that you often see in Yu-Gi-Oh, and it was just really cool to see them bring all of that together. It was actually surprisingly well thought out for how the show usually goes. So it's not even really his motivations, but more his origins and just how damn awesome that reveal was when they finally did it. So that's really all I have on Aporia. So moving on to number 4. So, kicking off the number 4 spot on our list is actually a newcomer to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, and that would actually be Arc 5's very own Yuri. Now, we haven't seen a whole lot out of Yuri yet. He is, for those of you guys who don't know, the fusion variant of the main character Yuya. There's 4 different dimensions, and each dimension has its own version of Yuya for some reason. That hasn't been explained yet. And so the fusion dimension is known as Yuri. And Yuri, for all intents and purposes that we know, is his personality can pretty much be summed up as evil bastard. We don't know anything about it. We don't know what deck he uses. We don't even know what his dragon is. There are a lot of dragons, so we know he has a dragon. But that's about the extent of it. The only real anything we've gotten on him so far has been in his episode, Yuri of the Cold Smile, in which he faces off against Yuzu in her own dimension, the standard dimension. And we don't even really see the duel. We just see them start. Yuri acts very confident and coy with just the creepiest smile on his face. And then we flash forward to the end of the duel where he's hunting her down, walking in the most slow-paced, menacing style I've ever seen, with this giant, shadowy dragon above him. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and it just, even though we know nothing about the character other than the fact that he is just pure evil and has a giant shadowy dragon, he's just amazing already. With that little, he's already secured his place as one of my favorite villains. And you can't argue with something like that. But since there's not much to say about him, you might as well just go ahead and move on. Number 3. Now, as much as I am sure many of you are not going to enjoy this one, my number 3 pick actually comes from Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, specifically Zexal 2, which is actually pretty good, despite what everyone seems to think about it. And in this, my number 3 spot belongs to Vector of the Barian Emperors. Now, there are 7 Barian Emperors in total, which means I think he, of all of them, is the best of them, because all 7 of them are technically bad guys. And the reason I love Vector so much is for one simple reason. To me, you can kind of categorize villains into 2 categories. The first is a villain with a ulterior motive, someone who does something for a reason, just means to an end. Then there are villains who just do it because they want to, because it's fun, because they just get a kick out of being the worst humanity has to offer. That's what Vector is. Sure, he wants power, but even then, the way he goes about it is not someone who just does it because he wants, like, because it helps him get to his means to an end. The way he does things is very much like a Jokerist kind of way, where he just does it because it's fun. When we first learn who Vector really is, it's through this other child. I forget what his name. It's Vector in Skies. Spoiler alert. Um, but what makes it so interesting is that he goes through this duel with Yuma in his Barian form. We see him for who he is, but he has a clone of himself in his human form beneath him, and he's kind of using that to sort of psych out Yuma. And about halfway through the duel, Yuma does a pretty decent attack, and it knocks the Barian form out. So then the human form starts to wake up, and he begins to do one of the creepiest laughs I've ever heard out of a Yu-Gi-Oh villain in my life. At which point he reveals that he truly is Vector, and it just destroys Yuma entirely because he trusted him with just everything that he was. He betrayed Astral to trust this guy, and to find out that he is actually the person that they were trying to defeat just destroyed him. And that was Vector's plan from the beginning, was to psychologically torment Yuma through his reveal. That's evil. I've never seen anyone do something like that. And it just, that reveal alone for me kind of secured it. Plus, he does have a pretty good villain laugh. I'm not going to lie, that does kind of sucker me into it as well. So, 1 point for the laugh, 2 points for the badass reveal, earning him the number 3 spot on my list. Now we move on to the next spot, number 2. For a lot of people, GX kind of seems to be one of those hit and miss shows. Either you like it or you don't. It kind of goes either way. And even for me, I'm kind of mixed on it. There are some parts I liked, some parts I didn't. However, one of the parts that I really liked was the Light of Destruction arc. It was just such a cool thing, and the main reason I like that arc so much is because of the villain Sartorius, who has earned his spot comfortably at number 2. Now, there's several reasons why I love Sartorius to death. One of which is because he's not actually himself, really. Now, for those of you who haven't seen The Light of Destruction, again, spoilers, but Sartorius is actually a fortune teller who has been possessed by this alien force known as the Light of Destruction. And do you remember what I said about Vector, where the only real motive is because he wants to? That's what the Light of Destruction is. It wants to destroy everything for the simple fact that it can and has nothing better to do. So he has possessed Sartorius in order to accomplish that mindless goal of destroying everything in order to help pass an afternoon. That's just what this thing does. And on top of that, it also uses one of my favorite decks, the Arcana Force. Now, I don't like the Arcana Force, like how they play per se. I like more the idea behind them. They're based off the tarot cards, and they have different effects based on what coin toss you get, which is supposed to be symbolic of how they have the tarot cards themselves have different meanings, whether it's right side up or upside down. And that's just kind of a cool idea. I wish there was a way to make them actually good and competitive, but whatever. Um, so, a combination of the cards, the character himself, and also for those of you who have seen the dub, not the dub, I'm sorry, the sub, and B, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you may have noticed that he sounds eerily familiar to another badass villain. Yeah, hilariously enough, Sartorius' Japanese voice is actually the same as Dio's Japanese voice from JoJo, which makes it oh so satisfying when he summons Arcana Force 22 or 21, I believe it was actually, the world, or as he says it, the world. Oh god, that's so satisfying to hear that. It sounds the same too. If you guys haven't seen it, go see it. It's actually hilarious. But fanboying aside, that is why I love Sartorius and what gets him the number 2 spot. However, only one person can stand on top as the best villain Yu-Gi-Oh has to offer. Take a look, shall we? Yes, that is right. The number 1 spot belongs to the one, the only Bakura of the original Yu-Gi-Oh series. Now, the original had a lot of great villains to offer. It had Pegasus, it had Merrick, it had a bunch of people. But Bakura for me stood out because he was the most consistent villain throughout. He was there even when Pegasus was still being the main villain, but he was there doing his thing. Just even in season 0, he was a villain. That speaks volumes when you can last from season 0 all the way through to season 5. That says a lot. And truly, though, what on top of just him being a sort of a background villain and constantly being a pain in everyone's side and just looking badass as hell, the main reason that I like him is actually because of him in season 5 when he finally does unleash his master plan, which he had been building up from even as far back as season 2 when he inserted part of his soul into the Millennium Puzzle. And from there, just the fact that everything came to fruition, that amazing final Shadow game, even getting to see him as the King of Thieves was just badass as hell. I love Bakura so much. And even though there's like 20 different characters throughout all of Yu-Gi-Oh who have worn trench coats, I gotta admit he's still one of my personal favorites, right behind Seto kinda there. But it's just really cool to actually see everything that Bakura does. I could spend an entire video on Bakura alone. That's how much I like him. Just everything that he does, how he does it, the decks he uses are creepy as high hell. And I don't know, there's always just been something about like that evil alter ego idea that I've always really liked. He's the villain for me who has everything going for him and nothing going against him other than his unfortunate villain status. But there's not much you can do about that. All of them are forced to lose, regrettably, so my hat goes off to you, Bakura. Not really, 'cause I'm wearing a headset, but if I wasn't wearing this, my hat would go off to you. So instead, I tip. And that is my top 5 villains of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did you enjoy this list? Did I miss out on some good villains? And if I didn't list a villain that you necessarily thought I should have been, well, one, let me know who it is, and two, please remember that this is my own opinion, and I couldn't break my own list of rules. So there are other people I wanted to include on this list and probably would have been on it if not for those rules I set, but I had to be fair about things. So again, let me know who you think should have been on this list below, or anyone that you liked who was on this list. Put your own list down below. Put anything you want down in the comments to let me know. Of course, don't forget to also like my page on Facebook so you can do the same there. Like this video and subscribe to my channel for further content. And until next time, happy hunting.